They called it a quick catch-up, but I'd worked here long enough to know that no one ever schedules a spontaneous meeting at 4:15 on a Thursday, unless they're about to ask something unpleasant or end something completely. I straightened my jacket, smoothed my hair in the glass door, and stepped into conference room C. It still smelled faintly of citrus cleaner and overused carpet glue. Sierra Kay sat at the head of the table with her signature oat milk latte oversized blazer, an unread laptop screen open in front of her like a stage prop. "Yvonne, thank you so much for making time," she said, voice light and syrupy. It was the same voice she used to narrate onboarding videos. I nodded and took the seat across from her, resting my hands calmly on the table. She was nervous. That was the first thing I noticed. The second was that her eyes kept flicking to the projector cable, as if she was rehearsing a reveal she wasn't quite confident in. "This is hard," she began, tone measured. "You've done incredible work over the years. Everyone respects you. But Clariotech is evolving. We're building a more dynamic culture, more aligned with today's digital storytelling landscape." She paused, gauging my reaction. "Your role, while vital in the past, no longer reflects where we're headed. We're pivoting, and we feel it's time for a transition." I didn't flinch. I'd heard prettier lies from uglier people. "I see," I said simply. Sierra nodded, visibly relieved. Maybe she thought that was it, that I'd walk out and fade quietly into HR paperwork. But then she reached for the clicker and turned toward the projection screen. What happened next was almost too absurd to believe. Instead of a roadmap or a transition timeline, up popped a PDF labeled Lexi Dunmore Employment Agreement, signed.pdf. Clear as day. Her name glowed across the screen, along with the words, Head of Operations, and a start date Monday. The same day I was being transitioned. Sierra's breath caught. She fumbled to disconnect the cable, but not before I saw the signature line hers. I said nothing, just watched her scramble, watched the fake composure melt. Then I smiled, a soft, knowing smile. I didn't need to yell. The truth had already introduced itself, and I still had access. I didn't take the elevator. I walked the stairs 4 flights just to feel something steadier than the silence that had filled that conference room. My badge still worked. No one had revoked my access. That struck me as both lazy and poetic. The hallway outside my office was quiet. A few faces glanced up, then quickly away the way people do when they know something's happening but haven't been told they're allowed to acknowledge it. No one said a word as I entered my office and began packing. I didn't have much. I'd never been one to decorate. A framed photo of my late dog, a ceramic mug from the company's 2nd anniversary, a notebook I'd filled halfway during the server migration of 2011. I wrapped the few items, carefully placing them into a canvas tote I kept under the desk. Then I took one last look around. The chair still creaked when I pushed it back. The monitor still had the small post-it I'd written years ago with the master sequence for the legacy load balancer. The servers still purred down the hall, running on protocols I helped design, name by name. On my way out, I passed the break room. Lexi stood center stage, ring light, angled perfectly, sipping from a branded energy drink as she chirped into her phone. "Here's how I batch content to stay productive, even during boring meetings." She didn't even see me, but I saw her. And more importantly, I saw the access panel behind her shoulder, still labeled with the permission stack I architected in 2008. Something clicked. By the time I got home, I'd already logged into the company VPN. It was still open. No deactivation, no expiration notice. I stared at the dashboard for a long moment, half expecting it to boot me. It didn't. I pulled up the admin console, full back-end access. My name still had top-level clearance. Servers, logs, compliance records. Every tool I'd ever used was still there untouched. So I did what I'd always done. I documented, archived, backed up, one folder at a time, quietly. And as I finished syncing the last of the internal audit trails, a message pinged from a name I hadn't seen in years. The message was from Carmen Vélez, a former data architect who'd left Clariotech about a year earlier. Her exit had been sudden, unspoken. One day, her office was full of whiteboards and client charts, and the next, it was dark, wiped clean, like she'd never been there. She wrote, "Saw your post. You okay?" I responded with a simple, "I'm processing." Within minutes, she asked if I had signal. Then came the real message. "There's something you should see. Invite coming." It was a Slack workspace, private, encrypted, innocuously named Legacy Loop. When I joined, there were 67 members, all former Clariotech employees, all gone within the last 18 months. Data analysts, compliance leads, QA testers, legal reviewers. Quiet names, the kind that kept systems running while others grabbed credit in all-hands calls. The first thread I opened was titled Culture Stack Culture. Screenshots of internal memos were posted like digital evidence phrases I recognized from Sierra's meeting. Relevant voices, youth-led branding fluency in social trends. Another thread detailed exit interviews, dozens of eerily similar phrases. Alignment mismatch, low cultural agility, traditional mindset. There were NDAs, severance hush clauses. A few had refused to sign. One woman, a former ethics officer, posted a redacted email chain. It showed HR suggesting her silence would ensure smoother transitions for future candidates. The tone was polished. The threat was clear. Then someone dropped a video. It was Lexi filming inside the restricted server bay. Ring light. Dance music. Caption: "When you find the only room with good lighting and no managers, LOL." I stared at the paused frame. My name was still on the access control protocol behind her, printed on the wall. The comments lit up. "That room is under NDA. She filmed next to protected infrastructure." Is this a joke? But it wasn't. None of it was. It wasn't just incompetence. It was curated chaos sold as innovation. I closed the video hand steady and opened a fresh folder on my desktop. This one I named Continuity, because now it wasn't just my story, it was ours. The memo arrived late at night, sent from an anonymous Proton Mail address, but I knew who it was before I opened it. Joelle Lynn had always been precise. Former compliance officer. Quiet as snowfall, but you never doubted she knew where every skeleton was buried. She and I had worked together for years, rarely spoke more than a few sentences at a time, but I trusted her judgment more than half the executive suite. Subject line, they're calling it Culture Stack 2.0. It was a PDF, 19 pages, glossy branding, slick typography. At first glance, it looked like one of those consultancy decks companies pay for when they don't want to do real thinking. But then I read the actual content. Prioritize influencer fluency. Deprioritize institutional knowledge that doesn't scale visually. Promote energetic content creators over traditional operators. Each line hit like a slow leak beneath the floorboards. Not just hollow jargon weaponized. They hadn't stumbled into this. They'd planned it. Packaged it, shared it in internal Slack channels as gospel. I recognized 3 phrases Sierra had used word for word in our meeting. Joelle had added a short note at the bottom. This was never about culture, just optics. I sat there for a long time staring at the document, the phrasing, the polished tone trying to mask its intention. They didn't want knowledge. They wanted content, noise, movement that looked like momentum. I remembered someone else who'd once understood the danger of that kind of thinking. Jenna Park, a DEI consultant I'd trained when she was just starting out. She had spine, precision, and she was still under contract with Clariotech. I found her encrypted contact info, attached the memo with no commentary, and hit send. Just a file. No message. She'd know how to read between the lines. Then I turned off the lights, walked to the window, and opened the folder on my desktop labeled Continuity. Inside it, I started a new document, Timeline Authored Dark Contradictions, XLSX. because if they were building their story on glitter, I'd answer with ledgers. The link came from Tanya in the Slack group, posted without commentary, just a timestamp and a warning. You'll want to watch before it gets pulled. I clicked it. Lexi was in the Clariotech break room ring light on branded smoothie in hand, spinning slowly in her office chair like she was the star of a mockumentary. Her caption read, "When the boomers finally leave and we can vibe in peace." The music was loud, trendy, forgettable. She sipped dramatically, laughed at something off camera, then struck a pose before saying, "Honestly, it's way less cringe around here now. Like we can finally innovate without dinosaur energy slowing us down." But it wasn't just the tone or the smirk that caught my attention. Behind her, barely blurred, sat a pile of open folders on the countertop. Familiar ones, compliance reports, legal review packets. One even had a client logo I recognized from our NDA stack. She was filming in the middle of restricted materials, completely oblivious. By the time the video hit TikTok, it was already too late. Someone from the legacy loop had forwarded it to the Office of Tech Compliance with a short note filmed inside an unsecured documentation zone. Violation pending. Then it hit Reddit. Then LinkedIn. Only this time, it wasn't just viral, it was venomous. Comments flooded in. Is this who replaced 30-year veterans? What kind of clown show is Clariotech running confidential docs in a TikTok fireable offense? And beneath it all, a single sentence reposted from my quiet LinkedIn farewell days earlier. I was told I no longer fit the culture. Now they knew what kind of culture had taken my place. That night, Tanya sent another message hearing Jenna Parks requested a formal audit. Something rattled her. I leaned back, the glow of the screen reflecting off the framed certificate still hanging in my hallway, the one Clariotech gave me on my 20th year. I opened a second window, pulled up the metadata log I'd saved from their internal drives, and started adding names to the timeline. I spent the morning at my dining table, laptop, open blinds, half drawn, the soft hum of the refrigerator, the only sound in the room. The folder labeled Continuity had grown fat with screenshots, exported message threads, hiring timelines and document properties, every one of them stamped with dates and names that no one thought would matter. But they mattered now. I built the dossier like I used to build infrastructure, one layer at a time, no fluff, no drama, just bulletproof logic. Contract dates showing Lexi's offer was signed before my termination paperwork existed. Slack exports proving the culture manifesto had circulated weeks before its official release. Metadata revealing who opened what and when. No accusations, no conclusions, just facts laid side by side. A mirror, not a weapon. I used a burner email to send it to 3 people, 2 board members I remembered from a restructuring back in 2015, and 1 external governance consultant I'd met during a client audit. The subject line was simple: potential governance gaps, internal patterns attached. Within 2 hours, Tanya messaged me from the Slack group. Lexi's account was just deactivated. She's gone from the company directory. Then came the next ripple, Sierra's digital word salad. A company-wide message titled "Refocusing Our Energy" dropped that afternoon. I read a screenshot someone sent. It was filled with phrases like alignment, momentum, vision, forward recalibration. It didn't say a thing, but the tone was brittle. Later, another message came from an old IT contact. They've locked down internal Slack channels. Legal's involved. Not sure who's pulling the strings, but Sierra looked rattled in the all hands. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my own Slack client, logged into a private channel I'd spun up the night before, and dropped in a note: begin phase 2. Then I uploaded a sanitized list of engineering leads I knew were still with Clariotech. Quiet, reliable people, the kind of talent who made sure launches never failed. And I started sending invitations. The TechOps conference had always been Clariotech's favorite stage. They'd once sent a marching band to launch a product suite that never left beta. I knew the floor plan by heart, but this year, something had changed. Their booth was dark. No lights, no reps, no glossy banners or smoothie stations, just a hastily printed sign taped to the front. Technical difficulties. Please visit us online. I stood across from it, sipping plain hotel coffee, watching attendees pause and glance around, confused. No one offered an explanation. It was like a ghost had left a fingerprint. My badge read Yvonne Trask, Head of Operations, Neuralia Health. The title still felt strange. Not because I doubted I'd earned it, but because for years I'd been conditioned to believe I was only meant to hold the fort, not lead the charge. Now I stood on the other side of the trade show floor. Same space, new alignment. The moderator called my name during the Women Building Infrastructure panel. There was a pause, then applause. Not polite, not loud, but steady, solid. I stepped up, offered my remarks, and when the question came about leadership transitions, I didn't mention Clariotech by name. I didn't have to. Afterwards, at the networking session, I was approached by familiar faces, vendor partners, systems, architects, former clients. One of them, Marcel, from a European diagnostics firm, pressed a folded card into my hand before walking off. Inside, it was one line. If you land steady, we follow you. I kept the note, tucked it into my coat pocket next to my speaker badge. Back in the hotel lobby, I refreshed LinkedIn. My quiet post from last week, just one sentence. I was told I didn't fit the culture. I disagree. 18,000 likes, nearly 500 messages. The comments weren't angry. They were grateful. That night in my room, I opened a shared document labeled Prospect Transfer Map, cross-referenced the names from the conference, and added a fresh column, Ready to Move. The emails started arriving slowly at first. A few vendors checking in, then a client asking if I had time for a private call. Within days, the trickle became a current. Clariotech was losing ground. The clip of Lexi Ringlet Careless Flippant had done more than embarrass them. It had forced eyes into places the leadership had kept closed. Audits were underway. Sierra had been placed on temporary leave pending internal review. The press release was diplomatic. The timing was not. I didn't celebrate. I took notes. At Neuralia, my team was still forming. Lean, flexible, intentional. We didn't need 100 people. We needed the right ones. That week, I received 3 resumes through back channels, former candidates from Clariotech's pipeline, each one, over 45 each one, passed over by Sierra's hiring committee for being misaligned with future branding. I remembered 2 of them by name. One had built Clario's first automated testing framework. The other had proposed a redundancy model that got shelved for being too cautious. The third had never made it past the recruiter. I read their applications twice, then scheduled back-to-back interviews. Each of them arrived early. Each came prepared. None of them mentioned what had happened at Clariotech unless I asked. I offered all 3 positions before the week ended. Not as favors, not to make a statement, because I needed builders, not performers, problem solvers who didn't panic when the metrics changed. Their onboarding was seamless. They asked sharp questions, offered improvements within their first week, and requested nothing but clarity. I gave them autonomy. One of them, a soft-spoken DevOps lead named Elliot, found an inefficiency in our deployment pipeline within 3 days, quietly fixed it. Quietly documented it, quietly moved on. No spotlight, no hashtags. I walked by his desk one morning just as he was pinning up a nameplate the office manager had left him. It was blank. He wrote it in with a pen. Block letters. No flair, just his name. That evening I finalized our upcoming sprint board and renamed the top-level project folder on our server foundation. The office was quiet in the best way. Not silent, just grounded. No curated playlists bleeding through smart speakers. No ring lights warming forgotten corners. Just the hum of concentration. The low murmur of collaboration. The occasional tap of a pen against ceramic when someone was thinking hard. I made it a habit to walk the floor once a day, not to check up, just to be present. I watched Elliot troubleshoot deployment flags while training a junior developer who couldn't stop taking notes. 2 desks down, Marcel from Systems led a planning call while knitting quietly between turns. Productivity didn't need theater. It needed room. We didn't call it culture. We didn't have to. On the whiteboard just outside my office, I'd written a quote weeks ago back when everything was still settling into place. Culture is what survives you. No one erased it. No one tried to replace it with something catchier. It stayed, grew into something understood, not recited. The team was eclectic mid-career parents, late-stage pivoters, ex-startup survivors, a few fresh faces with sharp minds, and no interest in building personal brands. They worked well together because no one had to posture. Results mattered. Noise didn't. We hit our milestones. We launched ahead of schedule. We delivered clean code, clean docs, and cleaner nights, no one burning out for a dashboard metric. My calendar had fewer meetings. My inbox stayed mostly sane. And at 6:15 every day, the lights dimmed automatically in the break area. A reminder to wrap up, go home, recharge. As I passed the kitchen one afternoon, Diane, our COO, was refilling her tea. She glanced at the whiteboard, then at me. "That yours?" she asked, motioning to the quote. I nodded. "We're lucky you brought yours here," she said, tapping her mug gently against the table before walking off. I turned back to the board and traced the letters with my eyes. The room behind me buzzed softly. No script, no stage, just people doing what they were hired to do. And that morning, just before our sprint sync, I got the message from Ethan. The text came just before the sprint meeting. Short, to the point. From Ethan, "Sierra's out. Lexi's contract terminated quietly last night. 2 major clients walked this week. Board's trying to manage spin. No one's buying it. There were no headlines, no lawsuits, just a slow unraveling. An ecosystem folding in on itself because the foundation was never built for weight, only for show." I stared at the message for a long moment, then tucked my phone into my coat pocket. There wasn't anything left to say. I hadn't shouted, hadn't threatened, hadn't stormed boardrooms or burned bridges. I'd simply watched. They'd lit the match. I let the wind do the rest. That evening, I rode the train home. Window seat. The city moved past in streaks of light and shadow, blurred but beautiful. My coffee was still warm. I didn't scroll through updates or refresh news feeds. I didn't need to know how the cleanup would go. The fallout wasn't mine to manage. Back at the apartment, I opened my laptop and reviewed the final onboarding folder. 3 new hires, all over 50, all brilliant. All previously passed over by companies desperate for fresh energy. I scheduled their start dates, slotted them into projects that needed deep thinking, not noise. Each of them would walk in next week and find a nameplate already waiting. No tests, no fit exercises, just trust. Outside, the streetlights flickered, and one by one, I left the blinds open and let the room glow gold. This wasn't revenge. This was restoration. All I'd ever wanted was to build something that mattered, something that lasted beyond Trendex and flavor of the month leadership. At Nerelia, I wasn't just tolerated, I was trusted. As I closed the final folder and powered down, I caught my reflection in the dark glass of the screen. Older, sharper, quieter. Turns out I fit just fine. They just didn't know what culture meant.